looks like we should be finally up and running here. Took us a little bit longer. Sorry, guys. Long story short, Facebook was being weird, and we were having to change internet browsers, and so we were finally up and rolling on a different browser than usual on Facebook. Actually, YouTube gave us no issues at all. But a little late getting started here, but welcome in. It is another Monday night. Figured to check in with you guys, chat, see what's up. Some news has happened around the Georgia program, or tangentially around the Georgia program. We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll take comments and questions, guys filing in. Marsha Fleming, good to see you. Dan Cooper as well. Tom Hopkins. So, we'll give people another minute or two to sort of see what happened, let people come in, that way they're not missing the start of the discussion, and sort of, let an audience build, as one Brennan Adams likes to say. Travis McCullough, good to see you. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope all the moms out there had a wonderful Mother's Day. I know yesterday was a pretty good day for me. Me and my brother and sister got to go see our parents for probably the first time in a while, and it was just a really nice day, spending with our mom. Keith Finney, what's up? Good to see you. All in all, it was a good Mother's Day yesterday, and I hope all the moms out there and everyone who got to celebrate their mom yesterday had a great day as well. We'll give a few more seconds here before diving into tonight's one big topic. It'll be related to a certain five-star running back who at one point was expected to sign with Georgia, and then a lot of drama happened in that, obviously. Did not end up happening. So, we'll give it another 20, 30 seconds, have a few more people file in, see what's up, and then sort of dive into the big news of today. Bobby Herring, good to see you. Danny Smith, welcome aboard. Glad to have you guys in. So about 2 minutes in now, plenty of time. Big news today is that Zack Evans, the five-star running back, I believe he finished as the number 2 overall running back in the 247 composite rankings for the 2020 recruiting class, enrolled at Texas Christian University today in sort of news that we first sort of heard about it last night, and then it came to fruition today. Obviously, for those that have forgotten or choose not to remember, Zachary Evans was, at the time, the number 1 ranked running back in the country. For months, Georgia had been recruiting him. Kendall Milton, Georgia's longtime running back commitment, had said he was more than willing to play with and have Zack Evans come to Georgia. Around December, and it had already been a pretty convoluted recruitment up until we got into December. He'd announced a Final Five. A lot of people expected Texas to be on that. Texas was not. A lot of twists and turns. I've made my decision. That decision ends up not becoming public. Takes an official visit to LSU, takes an official visit to Texas A&M. At different times, those were both sort of seen as the leaders. And Philip Beck asked, how good is he? Of the running backs that I saw in Florida at the Under Armour All-American game, he was far and away the best one there. His athletic gifts, I think, make it very obvious that he can be potentially a special running back. But as it got closer and closer to signing day, he decides, I'm just going to announce at the Under Armour All-American game. And he told Jeff Sentell and myself when we saw him at Under Armour that he had signed his letter of intent with the school that he was going to commit to on December 19th. It was widely believed that school was Georgia. That same date, December 28th, Evans told Sentell and I that the school he picked had a very good reputation of developing running backs. Georgia comes to mind there. He specifically mentioned that a rookie at that position, running back, won a Super Bowl the year before. He was, of course, mentioning Sony Michel, who won a title for the New England Patriots as they beat the Los Angeles Rams in Super Bowl 53. So it all is looking like Evans is going to announce Georgia on January 2nd. It was the same day they landed Darnell Washington as well. It was expected to be a very big day for the program. Taking you behind the curtain a little bit here, I myself was going to cover the recruitment live in Orlando that day, talk to him afterwards, why Georgia, what it was about that led him to pick Georgia, what was sort of what put the Bulldogs over the top for his recruitment. And because Justin Tell was out in San Antonio, he had left the day before to go cover, Keely Ringo and a number of the other players out there. And in that morning on January 2nd, there was a Dante Eady, good to see you, James Crump. that morning, it was at first sort of leaked out there that, hey, this guy Evans is not going to end up announcing his pick tonight, which is a little eye-raising. And then, of course, we're able to get it confirmed that he, in fact, is not going to announce where he would be going. During the game, he does an on-camera interview with ESPN. He ends up publicly apologizing for all that had happened. For some of the backstory here, he was suspended multiple times during his senior season of high school. He missed a state semifinal playoff game to take the ACT in the first half of that game, and he made it in time for the second half and ran for 176 yards. Sarah Carpenter, good to see you in here. So talent has never once been, and he was the offensive MVP of the game for the All-American game. So talent has never once been the issue with Zack Evans. It's sort of all the other off-field drama, off-field stuff. So, and the night before his state championship game, Evans is suspended once again, and does not play in that state title game. It is believed, Hugh Nash, good to see you. It is believed that it was related to Evans not turning over his cell phone while the rest of the team had turned over their cell phones the night before their state title game, which they ended up winning anyway. So you have that. That's another suspension. That actually happens after the signing period ends, and actually after it is believed that he signed with Georgia on, I believe, December 21st. So between then and the morning of January 2nd, Kirby Smart, or the Georgia football program, decided that Evans had lost the sort of ability to represent this program and come here. So they reportedly pulled his letter of intent, ultimately ended up releasing him from that and sort of reset his recruitment in a way. Georgia was not going to be the place he ended up going. As you know, Georgia went on to sign Dejon Edwards, I think a very good running back out of Colquitt County, who I think in years to come is going to prove to be a good and capable running back for the Georgia program. Colquitt has been one of the better programs in the country, and this is a very good player that they got out of there. Obviously, he's not the five-star prospect that Zack Evans is, but I expect Dejon Edwards to still come to Georgia and be a very good player. And Georgia still has Kendall Milton, who I think the world of, and I think is going to be a very, very good player. And as much as we've clearly just laid out everything that had gone into Evans' recruitment, Kendall Milton was the exact opposite of that. He handled very business-like approach. Went out and said, all right, these are my finalists. I'm going to go take 4 official visits: LSU, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. I'm going to decide in July where I'm going to end up going, and I'm going to shut my recruitment down from there. And whichever school I end up going to, I'm going to be a leader in that class. That is absolutely what he ended up being for Georgia in this recruiting class. He told Jeff Santella and I when we went out to do his commitment video that Georgia was going to sign a top 2 class. And this is back in July. And it wasn't going to be number 2. And, of course, that proved to be prophetic. Georgia signs the number 1 overall class in the 2020 recruiting cycle without Zack Evans in that class. So jumping back now, sort of like the Last Dance documentary, we're jumping all over the timeline here. Evans reopens his recruitment. He's not allowed to sign a letter of intent with somewhere, but he can still commit and enroll, which is what he ended up doing today with TCU. Takes an official visit to Ole Miss. Takes an official visit to Tennessee. And then was scheduled on March 20th to take an official visit to Florida. Because of the COVID-19 outbreak, that final official visit does not end up happening. It's sort of quiet, recruitment, where is he going to go? Eventually, as time goes on, it comes out today that he is signed and enrolled with TCU. It is close to home. While a lot of people thought he would ultimately end up leaving the state, he's going to Fort Worth to play for Gary Patterson. I think, given all the backstory that we've had to this point, I think it makes sense for a school like TCU to take a chance on a guy like Evans. He's the first 5-star prospect that they've ever landed. And while he didn't get the chance to play at Georgia, I think a lot of people here don't think that Evans should totally have his ability to play college football ripped away from him because of some of the mistakes that he made as a 17-year-old. And, when we got to talk to Kirby Smart about sort of recruiting in the 2020 recruiting class and how it came together and some of the decisions that were made on guys, this is back in February. I asked him, and it was the last question of his press conference, but I asked him because obviously these coaches aren't allowed to publicly talk about players until they are signed with the school. And he's never going to publicly outright say, something about Zack Evans. But I asked him in sort of a roundabout way, how important is a thing like character, a thing like maturity in sort of your evaluation process? Do you maybe take a risk on a guy who might not have it all put together upstairs and might be, mentally a few steps behind, not maturity wise, a few steps behind where some of the other guys might be, and sort of how important is character and wanting guys who are going to represent your program sort of do it in the right way. And I thought his answer was very telling. This is a direct quote: "More each and every year. It should never be the only thing, but it's definitely the most important thing. The older I get, the wiser I get, the more you realize that chasing after guys that don't believe in the same principles and values of your university and your program, they're just not worth it. There's just too much time spent on guys that if you're having to chase them around, it's just not worth it. Take the guys that want to be there and go play with the guys that want to be there. Number one, you'll enjoy your job day to day. Your staff will enjoy it more, as will the other players. It's very important to us." And I think that quote, while he does not obviously talk about Zack Evans by name, it is very telling in sort of the way I think he went about saying and talking about it, that, Evans is just not the type of player that we necessarily want at Georgia. We don't want a guy like this who's going to create headaches, where football is clearly not the most important thing. I think when you talk to Kendall Milton, you hear and see from Kendall Milton, he makes it very clear that playing well and representing the University of Georgia is the most important thing to him so that he can go on to have the NFL career that he wants to have. I think with Zack Evans and what he showed during his recruitment process, that was not necessarily always the case. And you understand that Georgia might not want to take a risk on a guy where if his high school team before the biggest game of the year in a state championship game is deciding, hey, we know you're great, we know you're the best running back in Texas. Some people have said he's the best running back to come out of Texas since Adrian Peterson. When the head coach of your high school team says, hey, we know you're great, we don't need you to win this game, and they didn't, I think that's very telling, and I do think that final suspension played a big role in the fact that Milton is at TCU and not at Georgia right now. So we'll open it up for some comments, some questions here. I see some stuff on Jamie Newman, as always. I see some stuff on, the season opening and sort of when that might be. I still think we're a few weeks away from decide. I think the big date there to focus and pay attention to is July 1st. I think if we have something in place by then, at least maybe not, starting practicing or conditioning, but having a plan in place by then, I think is going to be very important for the season to start on time, which as of today, I think that's my belief that will happen. Mike Gay thinks Milton will be a star. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I just think Milton is going to be a very good player for Georgia. It might not be this season with Zamir White in front of him, but I think just everything between the ears with Milton, I think, is what really makes him stand out to me. Seeing some of these kids, he just is so, I think, really mature. And I wrote this, I think, back in January after the whole Evans thing sort of shook out. He's really, I think, more of the outlier here than Evans, because while maybe not as recruitment as wild as Evans was, you see pretty strange recruitments from time to time. Whereas I think with Milton, he just totally went about it in a business way, and it was a very impressive way to sort of go about it. And for that, he has my respect, and I think he will absolutely handle his business at the University of Georgia. Sarah Carpenter, she brings up the Florida Gators. Yeah, Brandon Adams sort of touched on this in his podcast today. The big loss here is for Florida and Tennessee, two schools that need to sort of close the gap in that talent edge between Georgia, get more players like Zack Evans. And if Alabama, LSU, and Georgia are willing to pass on him, Florida and Tennessee should have been seen as schools that could sort of, take his talents and help if they can keep him on the right track, close the gap. They both openly recruited him. They wanted him. I think with Florida in particular, there was a lot of thought that after he didn't commit to Tennessee on signing day, I think a lot of people thought that Florida was going to be the school that ended up visiting him, but he never visited Florida, and I think because of the COVID outbreak, that's not going to happen. And because of that, he just never felt comfortable really getting to know the coaches from Florida, getting a sense of what that program is about. And I absolutely see this as a big loss for Florida because they didn't land a running back in this 2020 recruiting class. Yes, they bring in Lorenzo Wingard, a transfer out of Miami who was a one-time 5-star prospect. But, Florida is a team that, as well as they've done, like, it's clear the last hurdle that they have to clear is that on a year-in, year-out basis, they can bring in talented players, guys who could play at Georgia, Alabama, LSU, schools they're competing with at an SEC championship level, because I think that's what they have to do now. And to not have a guy like Evans on your team, to just miss on him and have him end up at TCU, I think that's not a significant loss, but it's something where I think if you're a Florida fan, you'd like to see them win that and, understand that, hey, maybe talent prevails. I know in the past, Florida took chances on a lot of risky character guys. The Pouncey twins come to mind, obviously Aaron Hernandez, and they got the most out of them, and they won titles with those guys. So, while guys might, not be finished products as high schoolers, I definitely think that a lot of them, including Zack Evans, deserve a chance to go to the next level and sort of still have those college football dreams. And I think for Florida to sort of lose out on a talent like Evans here, who would have been perhaps and Pete Ellis sort of touched on the overlying point here. I think if you're a Georgia fan, while some of you would have liked to have seen him play at Georgia, he is that talented. Like the number one ranking or that he had for a majority of the cycle, I think was absolutely warranted. But you're thrilled that he's not wearing Florida blue or Tennessee orange, and you're not having to see him every year. You'll probably never see Zack Evans match up against Georgia, and I think taking it from that standpoint, it's a relative win in the sense that you hear the schools that he's looking at. He wanted to, I think, go in the SEC, and that to not really have that, I think if you follow Georgia, you follow this recruitment, and there were a number of people who wanted Evans to be a Bulldog, and he's not. So I think if you're a Georgia fan, the final step back and look from view from this is Kirby Smart's made it pretty clear that Evans didn't necessarily fit the culture that he wanted to be in, on and around this team. He wants guys like Kendall Milton. So I think the larger view is, Kirby has shown he's an incredible evaluator of talent, and I think going forward, he's going to he wants high character guys. He wants guys like Andrew Thomas, guys like DeAndre Swift, guys who come from strong academic backgrounds who he's not going to have to chase to go to class, guys who are going to take care of their business, hopefully develop in 3 years, become first round or high NFL draft picks, and move on and encourage sort of that next wave of guys to come in. DeAndre Swift, while he'll never have played with Kendall Milton, he knows who he is, and he's talking him up and sort of praising him. And that's sort of how the cycle goes of you bring in these guys, they do really well, they sell themselves to the next generation, and it's sort of, a wheel, a circular wheel going over and over again. And that's how I think Alabama got to be what Alabama is, just by sort of running itself. So we will, Zentry Allen, I'm thrilled with talking about Kendall Milton more than Zack Evans. Well, we've got plenty of time to talk about Kendall Milton in the coming months ahead. I've written and said in the past, I think of the guys we would have gotten to see at GD, I think from an offensive standpoint, he would have had the best day. He would have been the most interesting player. Just given in the past, Kirby Smart has not made the number one running back do a whole lot, and I think Zamir White would have filled that role. So you would have seen a lot of Milton, what he has to offer, and I think he put on a significant amount, not a significant, but a good amount of muscle mass, making him even stronger. And he's already a big back. I believe he was up to 235 in his weight, and he does not look like he is fun to tackle. I will say that much. So I think he's someone who Georgia and will find a way to get him on the field and have him be in a productive role this season, whether it be on special teams, Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, those guys play special teams to start, or if he's able to earn sort of the role of being that number two back, I think behind Zamir White, and Kirby Smart has shown over and over again that if he can, he wants to rotate in running backs. Let's see. Questions, comments. How's everyone doing? Again, it's Connor Riley. We just spent about 20 minutes talking about Zack Evans. Big news of the day, he goes to TCU. I think if you're a Georgia fan, you are thrilled that he is not going to play in the SEC, specifically one of your SEC East rivals. Tennessee and Florida, those were schools that had recruited him. So for him to not go there, I think you are pretty excited about that. I saw Philip Jordan Wells was in the comment section. Philip, good to see you. Hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. No one is – yeah, and again, I think the big thing with Evans I do believe he deserves a second chance. And while it might not be at a program like Georgia, I think TCU is a good fit for him in the sense that he still gets to play big-time college football, and he'll get a chance to make a name for himself. And if he can keep himself on the straight and narrow, he's got a chance to go be a very special player and make it work in the NFL. So I think that's where it is there. Norris Thornton asks, how are we looking at wide receiver? Well, this weekend you got some not the best news in the world. Arian Smith, one of the Georgia signees in the 2020 recruiting class, he had surgery to repair an old injury on his wrist, which makes sense that he has it now. He's a guy who's a two-sport athlete. He's a very good track athlete, has run with Matthew Bowling at the Pan Am Games. So he shows that he has wrist surgery. It's not expected to be a long-term injury. He's expected to be able to go at camp whenever that ends up being. Obviously, that won't be until later July at the earliest. But he's one of 5 incoming freshman wide receivers. He joins Ladd McConkey, Justin Robinson, who was able to go through offseason workouts as an early enrollee, Jermaine Burton, and Marcus Roseme. From what he brings to the table standpoint, Arian Smith might be the fastest player on Georgia's team next year. Yeah, Jay Ships on YouTube, I agree. I do think he will be fine. Arian Smith is the closest thing I think Georgia has had to a Mecole Hardman since Mecole. Now, obviously, it's not all that long ago. But I think last year's team pretty clearly showed how much they missed having sort of that speed element. And while he's maybe not as refined or as polished as Marcus Roseme, who I'm very high on, and Jermaine Burton, who Jeff Sintel is very high on, I think Smith has a potential to make an early impact either at the wide receiver spot or as a punt returner, because he just has a rare and unique speed element that the rest of that Georgia wide receiver room right now just does not have. And if Georgia wants to get faster and play faster on the outside, it's going to be with a guy like Smith on the field. So I do think ultimately he's going to be fine. Just a minor injury scare. Nothing, it's not like a torn ACL. Jaden Hazelwood, Oklahoma receiver, who Georgia fans know because of his recruitment, actually suffered a torn ACL while training at home. So I think overall, while it was a minor thing to worry about this weekend, come the start of the season, I believe that Arian Smith will be just fine. As far as the rest of the receivers, Dominic Blaylock is still working his way back from his knee injury. Obviously, he's not being able to be under constant surveillance by Ron Corson, but the good thing, as Kirby Smart has said about this, is that you're able to sort of rehab anywhere and do what you need to do there. So I don't know how again, with Blaylock and sort of like Milton, I'm as high on Blaylock as anyone. With him, it's just going to be him getting on the field and seeing how he feels. And, sometimes with ACLs, we see guys bounce back right away or relatively quickly. You look at the wide receiver position. Cooper Kupp had a great year for the Rams this year after coming back from a torn ACL a season ago. But then for every Cooper Kupp, there's a guy like Malcolm Mitchell who was pretty clearly never the same after his ACL injury. So, with Blaylock, while I believe he is rehabbing hard and will get back on the field, as far as what to expect from him as a contributor level, we won't really know until we see how he sort of manages with playing with that knee brace and being able to make the cuts and everything that comes with that. And then, of course, there is George Pickens, who will have a lot of hype surrounding him. I expect him to be first-team All-SEC wide receiver to start the season. So, give me 1 second for a water break. He's obviously a very talented player, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he grows and expands his game this sophomore year. I think the big thing with him is just he has to stay focused and locked in for 60 minutes and do all the little things that he has to do off the field to make sure that he maintains his eligibility and is able to stay on the field. So we'll sort of see how things go from there. Jay Shippies asked on YouTube, any status on the replacements of Hot Rod, that is Rodrigo Blankenship, the longtime kicker for Georgia? It's going to be a very interesting battle. They bring in Jared Zirkle as sort of a blue shirt guy who could be a place kicker. I think Zirkle, there's probably a pretty good chance he ends up handling the the kickoff duties. He's clearly got a very good leg for that. As far as what to expect from him as a place kicker, I would think he's a name to watch. I think Jake Camarda, the punter, is a name to watch. Rodrigo Blankenship has talked him up quite a good bit. So I think at the end of it, it'll come down between those two guys. They'll have a competition, and whoever the best kicker is, I think Kirby's going to go with them. It's worth reviewing with Rodrigo. It was not Rodrigo to start his college career. William Ham actually won that job to start in 2016, and then eventually Rodrigo took it back and never gave it back, as he had one of the more stellar Georgia careers in recent memory. So, with that kicker thing, I certainly think during this year, it's probably to start the season going to be a week-to-week thing, and a guy's going to win it to start the season. But if he has kicking issues, I don't think Kirby Smart's going to hesitate at all to give the other guy a shot and see how he handles kicking in big-time situations. And, the interesting thing is not having a sure thing with Rodrigo at kicker. It does make me wonder if Kirby Smart's maybe a little bit more aggressive in sort of fourth down situations this year, because in the past he's been able to rely on Rodrigo, who's usually one of the more reliable kicking options. Won the Lou Groza Award, is probably going to be the starter for the Colts this year. Not having that and not being able to rely on that, I think might be a benefit maybe to Georgia's play calling and sort of the aggressive way that they can maybe they have to play now because they don't have a kicker that they can consistently rely on to get them 3 points and sort of just lay back and play defense, and sort of the offense knows, hey, we have to get 6 here because we can't just rely on Rodrigo Blankenship to get us 3 points anymore. I see a couple people bringing up Tennessee and Cody Brown. Within the past week, Cody Brown is a very highly rated running back, I believe the number 10 running back in the country. A very good player from the state of Georgia, was sort of, I believe, by the Atlanta Touchdown Club, voted the best junior in the state last year. Plays for Parkview High School, I believe, led them to a state semifinal appearance at the highest level of the sort of Georgia football playoff classification. He commits to Tennessee. In Tennessee this weekend, they get 3 more 4-star commits. They are sort of continuing on that recruiting momentum. I think with Tennessee, and Justin Tell has talked and written about this a bunch, it'll be interesting to see sort of how they finish the class. They have 21 commitments right now. They had 23 signees for their entire class last cycle. So obviously there's going to be some decommitments and probably some processing out of players. But for the most part, on paper, this class is largely done. Now, they're very involved in the recruitment of 2 big-time Georgia targets. Shmuel Munden, 5-star linebacker who out of Dallas, Georgia, who plays for South Paulding. And Amarius Mims, 5-star tackle out of Cochran, Georgia, plays for Bleckley County there. Those 2 guys are guys Georgia wants. A lot of people think Georgia's going to end up getting them, but Tennessee's making it difficult. And if Tennessee can land either of those guys, that I think would turn a lot more heads than perhaps what they've done to date. Cody Brown, while a very good player, he was not the, I think, priority target for Georgia at that running back position at the moment in this 2021 recruiting class. I think that goes to Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. Obviously, with Edwards, him living in Michigan, it will be a tough pull, especially because he's just not able to visit. So I think that is a big thing to watch going forward with Georgia. But Del McGee has proven over and over and over and over again that when he wants a running back, he's pretty capable of bringing him in. A lot of people perhaps a year ago would have thought landing a guy like Kendall Milton out of California, a place Georgia had no success recruiting in, would have been a tough grab. He goes out there, lands him, and actually – Jermaine Burton ends up being another California to come east, though Burton obviously had a lot more ties to the Atlanta area. So we'll sort of see what there. Yeah, Eric Emmett with midfield aggression. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch this year when they sort of get into that 40, in between the 40s and 30s. In the past, Kirby would just sort of, I think, rely on their kicking game and defense. And this year, they're just, because of the uncertainty of kicker, and they're not going to have that trust early, certainly. And it won't potentially be till later in the year, I think, till they know what they have at the kicker position. So, when they open with games against Virginia, which is going to be a tough out, and when you have to go on the road at Alabama and you can't rely on your kicker, I think that's going to force him in the offensive side of the ball to be a little bit more aggressive, to take more risks, to go for more and be more aggressive on third and mediums and fourth and short situations. Because, again, you need touchdowns. And that's something I think myself, Brennan Adams, have been critical of Georgia in the past. It seems like, and you saw this in the Notre Dame game, perhaps Kirby is just a little too I'm jumbling words here. Hit the 30-minute mark. Georgia's just been a little too relaxed when it comes to that and say, hey, we can just play kicking and defense. And to beat the best teams in the country, to beat an Alabama, to beat an LSU, to beat a Clemson and Ohio State, you can't really do that. And you saw a little bit of that in the South Carolina game last year. I think that came back to bite them because they were just like, we can out-talent you. And I think the best teams and the best programs are able to build sort of that talent advantage while also melding that sort of underdog mentality, and we have to pull out all these stops to win. And I think this year it'll be really interesting to see how Kirby Smart sort of goes about balancing that. James Crump and Travis McCullough, so you guys are having a sort of debate about where Georgia finishes. There's going to be a top 3 recruiting class every season under Kirby Smart. It'll be tough to catch Ohio State this year, just given where they are and sort of the potential commitments they can still earn. But if there's one school that's going to catch them or has the potential to catch them, it's probably going to be Georgia. There are a number – Philip Jordan Wells, again, saving my day. Reliant is sort of the word I was looking for. Georgia's going to finish with a really good recruiting class. Today, some news came out. Tony Grimes, a major Georgia target for the 2021 recruiting class, 5-star cornerback, announced he's going to put out a top 3. I'd be pretty surprised if Georgia wasn't one of those 3 finalists. And, I did some digging and some combing through the records. No program has ever landed the number one cornerback and the number 1 safety in the same class. But Georgia might be well positioned to do that in this cycle. Grimes is obviously right now the number 1 ranked cornerback. James Williams is the number 1 safety. Georgia has been a long time he's been a long-time Georgia target. They're already in the top 3 for him, along with Clemson and Alabama. He plays for American Heritage High School, which is the same school that produced Sony Michel, Tyson Campbell, Isaiah McKenzie, Marshall Morgan, all very successful Georgia players. And if they can land those 2 guys, they're going to have a very good case at landing the number 1 class, especially if they're able to finish off with guys like Donovan Edwards that we mentioned earlier, Amarius Mims, the left tackle, who I believe is the number 6 or number 5 overall player in the country, and Munden, who's going to be a 5-star linebacker and very well like guy. So while they might not get, Barrett Carter, they might not win every recruiting battle. Smart, especially to start this class, has done a much better job of retaining the state's top talent. And because of that, they're going to be just fine because as we've seen year over year, when you're able to go in literally any living room in the country, whether it be in Clovis, California, where Kendall Milton was, Las Vegas, Nevada with Darnell Washington, sort of anywhere in between, you're going to be able to win a lot of recruiting battles. We've got about 30-ish minutes here. So any last minute comments and questions? Yeah, Brian Kephart brings up Tennessee fans. Hey, just let them chirp and let them do their talking because the season's going to roll around and their schedule as currently constituted is very difficult. They have to go to Oklahoma. They have to come to Georgia. And then they get Alabama and Florida, and those are 4 top 10 programs, and it's very conceivable that they lose all 4 of those games. They're going to be underdogs, at least a touchdown underdog in each one of those, I'd venture to guess. And it's hard to sell progress when it's year 3 and the best you've done, and let's say they lose those 4 games, and they win the rest of their games on their schedule, which I don't know how comfortable you'd feel saying that. Given, Tennessee last year lost to BYU and lost to Georgia State at home to open the season. That's 8-4. And no one's getting all that excited about 8-4 in year 3. Yes, it's progress, but it's not where I think the Tennessee fans, as delusional as they might be, will want to be. So just let Tennessee fans talk right now. It'll be okay. Season will roll around. I believe they play Georgia November 14th in Athens, same weekend as Masters weekend. I still think Georgia has a pretty significant advantage over Tennessee, and the Bulldogs, at least right now on May 11th, should win that game. Brian Kephart brings up another bit of news today. Javari Ritzy, defensive lineman prospect out of North Carolina, a guy Georgia very much likes. He's going to announce his commitment on June 12th. It's his parents' anniversary. While Georgia very much wants him, with the way Mack Brown has recruited that state of North Carolina right now, I believe that I think there's a pretty good chance that's where Ritzy ends up, especially because, with the lack of visits right now, I think that's going to encourage more guys who commit during this period to stay home. Bud Elliott of 247 Sports had a very interesting piece last week about just the number of commitments that are happening now and happening during this pandemic. It is far and away where the number of prospects that were committed in past years. And so that might potentially down the line if and when things get opened back up, lead to a number of decommitments. So, and you're almost certainly, as people mention on these chats, you're going to see that with Tennessee. But right now, I don't know if you're going to see that with Georgia. They've only got 7 commitments right now, but a lot of them are still very talented, and a lot of seem very, very committed to where Georgia will end up being. So I would, there's, maybe 1 or 2 right now who you could potentially, because of coaching changes or things like that, end up seeing. But Brock Vandagriff is going to be a Georgia Bulldog. I think Michael Morris is going to be a Georgia Bulldog. He was going to be a Bulldog before Sam Pittman left, and he still ended up being one after Sam Pittman left. David Daniel is going to be a Georgia Bulldog. Those are guys who are going to stick with this class. You continue to develop, continue to bring in guys like Shmuel Munden and bring in the elite prospects. Obviously, there are some other names I know in the Facebook chat is asking about Corey Foreman and Mason Smith. That'll be really interesting to see. Right now, Kirby Smart and Georgia probably are the betting favorites to land Foreman and Smith, 2 5-star defensive linemen. But it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world to see him pull that off. Foreman out of Los Angeles and Smith out of Louisiana. They have a very good relationship with both of them. And they've said they want to play together. And Georgia, I think, is one of the schools that can potentially offer them early playing time. They're going to lose a number of defensive linemen from this current team for going into 2021. So it's certainly a need. I think from where you look at how they've recruited that position, it is certainly not on the same level as the linebackers, the running backs, the offensive line. So there is a potential there for early playing time, which could very well be the difference for a guy as talented as Corey Foreman and a guy as talented as Mason Smith. So we'll wrap it up. We'll leave it there. Talked about Zack Evans, did a little bit of recruiting, talked about receivers. So, had a great time talking with you guys. Another one of these in the books. Another week closer to hopefully getting through this pandemic. I know in Georgia they've continued to lax social distancing rules and those things of that nature. I will say it was really nice to get to see my parents yesterday, to actually get out of the house and see people. And I hope that we are, as a society, a little bit closer to getting to do that once again. So stay safe out there. Keep tuning into the various Dog Nation programs. We'll have Dog Nation Daily, obviously, every Monday through Friday. I don't know what day I'm going to be on there this week, but I'm sure there will be. Mike Griffith's on the beat tomorrow. Jeffson tells Before the Hedges on Wednesday to give you a more and deeper recruiting scoop on what's going on. And then we have a Cover 4 Live every Thursday at 3. So, even though right now it's not necessarily normal, there's still, even if things were normal, it'd still be sort of similar storylines this time of year, just given what college football looks like in May. So Dog Nation's still going to be there, pumping things out, giving you guys all the latest news and notes, stemming from Zack Evans today to potential commitments and other things down the line. So all in all, it's great seeing you guys. Have a great week. Stay tuned into Dog Nation. Stay safe out there.